This Black Women's Equal Pay Day, we are excited to have a conversation with Power New York board member Yolanda F. Johnson. Yolanda's life work encompasses the performing arts, teaching, and nonprofit management with an accent on women and women of color in philanthropy and the arts. She is the first African American to serve as president of Women in Development and is the founder and leader of YFJ Consulting, which recently launched Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy, WOKE, an organization dedicated to celebrating, inspiring, and championing women of color in fundraising and philanthropy. Thank you so much, Yolanda, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I'll get right to our first question. Why do you think there's still such a large wage gap for Black women?
Well, I think that change takes time, and that it also takes intentional increases of momentum and people just continuing to strive and push things forward. And I think that the systemic issues that we deal with in general in our society and in the workforce are certainly also at play when it comes to equal pay. And it's not just about the equal pay itself, but it's about all women being educated about what they're worth and what the going rates are. And then there are other issues such as sometimes we get complacent in our own fields because we have a job, we're comfortable in it, and we haven't really researched for a while to see what else is going on out there. So just to make sure that there are those repositories of information and data that are easily accessible for women to go to bat for themselves, and that employers understand that they should go to bat and be receptive to women when they're coming to them. I know that I had my own experience with it years ago, and it took a woman recruiter to illuminate for me the fact of how grossly underpaid I was. She was floored. It was just like, what is going on? And as far as that was concerned, that was a woman thing and then a Black woman thing, I think. And so once I had refreshed myself and really had dug into the data to understand, what was going on around me in the environment, I never looked back. From that day on, that was a really pivotal moment for me. But it took having somebody there to say, hey, that community, that camaraderie, having another woman say, you really should look at this, was really, really important. And so I think that as women, we have to stick together when it comes to that, because other people won't tell us, because, if they don't have to pay you, they certainly will not.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's so powerful to hear about you discussing learning how to know your worth. And I feel like that's something I've seen a lot in media over the past few months, is this sort of turn, especially with Black women in entertainment, of underscoring the fact that they know their worth and they know they're not being paid correctly for their positions or for their content. So in a similar vein to this discussion, what tools or resources do you think can help Black women achieve pay equity?
I think that places like Power New York, things like Equal Pay Day, again, having those tools readily available. And for my answer to the first question, I just want to make sure I'm not putting the onus just on the Black women to definitely know. I think the data should be out there. And again, employers should be open, and they should know it too. They should know it, and they should operate understanding the important role that they have in building the sense of equity. It goes into racism, but also capitalism. It's a very dicey sort of situation, because sometimes it's just about what my grandfather called the almighty dollar. It does get into that, and then you have all the other different layers. So I think that employers should educate themselves. They should be required to educate themselves. You can't change someone's moral compass, but you certainly can hold them to task for making sure that they try to create an equitable environment. And then the tips and tools, organizations that support women, places like Power, things like Equal Pay Day, places like WOKE, who can take and extrapolate that data that we get from Power and share it with our audiences. So I think it has to kind of go viral in a way, where we share this data and this information. And again, a repository, there needs to be a place where everybody can go to understand. I know that for WOKE, we've created an online resource library where we are putting the Equal Pay Day, the different paydays for different women of color and for all women in
Mm-hmm.
there so that people can easily access it and not have to wonder. I think I heard that somewhere, where do I go for it? So when you have information at your fingertips, you can then fight the good fight, just like a lot of those women, Black women in Hollywood, are doing right now. It's because they know for sure, so they can come to you and say, this is the case. And then the employer or the studios have to make the decision as to their reaction.
Mm-hmm. That's so great to hear about woke sort of equipping women with the resources and tools they really need to know their worth and to advocate for themselves. I want to focus our last question, since you're such a leader in the field of philanthropy and development. What role do you think philanthropy can play in addressing the gender wage gap?
I think it can play an incredibly important role. So, woke exists at that intersection between all the people who are doing the good work. So, it's the fundraisers and the philanthropists, and sometimes there's this juxtaposition between the two. And I think that when people who have the resources to give back in ways that will impact, that will create a real lasting change, I think that's extremely important. And we're seeing a lot of that happen now in philanthropy for women of color and for Black women in particular at this point in time with the movement, the most recent movement for racial equity. So I think that we also get into the concept of allyship. And I have established an organization called Allies in Action Membership Network, which is for allies who want to champion women of color in fundraising and philanthropy. And it's based upon 4 pillars of education, legislation, inclusion, and action.
Mm.
And so when it comes to that actionable portion, part of that is philanthropic, where each ally is going to give a gift that is meaningful for them. It's not a set amount, but toward women and girls of color or toward racial equity. So you have to put your money where your action is, and really follow it up and be, again, intentional about it. And it doesn't just have to be allies. A lot of people of color are far more philanthropic than we give ourselves credit for. And so just to think very strategically about where your dollars are going, and if they're going to a place that's going to champion women, that's going to champion equity, that's going to educate people, that's going to put the facts and figures out there. So there has to be a strategy behind philanthropy. It's heart and it's your mind and it's your hand, right? So when we put our dollars behind this good work toward equity, it makes a really, really huge difference. And it doesn't have to be huge dollar amounts.
Mm-hmm.
Even smaller, more manageable amounts for the average person can go to doing a lot of good work to support women.
Well, that's fantastic, Yolanda, and thank you so much for all the important work you do and taking the time to talk with me today for Black Women's Equal Pay Day.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so important to celebrate Equal Pay Day, and I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to support the cause.